The message came through the Deep Space Communication Array at exactly 1423 Galactic Standard Time. It was weak, broken by static and distance, but the desperation in the alien voice cut through every barrier like a knife through flesh. This is Chancellor Vexhai of the Zilani Republic. If anyone can hear this transmission, please respond. Our worlds are burning. Our people are dying. The Korthak Empire has broken through our final defense lines. We have maybe days before complete extinction. The voice paused, and in that silence, the sound of explosions could be heard in the background. When the speaker continued, the words carried the weight of a dying civilization. We have tried to fight them for 3 years. Every ship we built, they destroyed 10 of ours. Every defense we created, they broke through like paper. They do not want prisoners. They do not want our resources. They want us gone from the universe forever. Communications Officer Nix turned the volume up at her station, aboard the monitoring vessel Star's Eye. Around her, the mixed crew of different alien species had gone completely silent. The Korthak Empire was known throughout the galaxy. They were the nightmare that every peaceful species whispered about in the dark. The Korthak forces number in the millions. The voice continued. Their ships block out our sun. Their weapons turn our cities to glass. We have sent requests for help to the Altarian Federation, the Proxima Alliance, and the Core Worlds Council. All of them have refused. They say the cost would be too great. They say the Korthak are too powerful to fight. Captain Theron, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, stood behind Nix's station. His species, the Valdari, were known for their military prowess, but even they feared the Korthak. Poor bastards, he whispered. Nobody can help them against that kind of force. The transmission crackled again. This is our final broadcast on this frequency. In 6 hours, the Korthak fleet will reach our homeworld of Zolaris Prime. 20 billion souls live on this planet. 20 billion mothers, fathers, children who will be dead before the next sunrise because the galaxy has decided we are not worth saving. Nix felt her heart breaking. She had been monitoring deep space communications for 15 years, but she had never heard such raw despair. The Zilani were a peaceful people, known throughout the galaxy for their art and their kindness. They had never hurt anyone. They had never taken anything that was not freely given, and now they were about to be wiped out simply because they were too weak to defend themselves. If there is anyone out there with the power to help us, we beg you. We do not ask you to die for us. We do not ask you to sacrifice your own people. We only ask that if you can do something, anything, please try. Do not let the galaxy forget that we existed. Do not let our children's screams go unheard. The Chancellor's voice broke on the last words. When he spoke again, it was barely above a whisper. This is Chancellor Vexhai of the Zilani Republic, broadcasting on all frequencies, to anyone who will listen. We are out of time. We are out of hope. We are out of everything except the belief that somewhere in this vast universe, there might be someone who still believes that mercy matters more than fear. The transmission ended with a burst of static, then silence filled the bridge of the Star's Eye. Captain Theron activated the communication logs and began the standard procedure for forwarding important messages to various governments and military commands. But as he worked, he knew what would happen. The message would be filed away, analyzed, and ultimately ignored. The Korthak Empire was too strong. Their fleet was too large. No single government had the power to face them alone, and no alliance of governments was willing to risk everything for a dying species they barely knew. Captain, Nix said softly, there's something else. The message was broadcasted on all known frequencies, including some I've never seen before. Whoever sent this was trying to reach everyone, including species we haven't made contact with yet. Theron nodded grimly. Desperate times call for desperate measures. They're hoping someone out there has the power to help them, even if we don't know who that someone might be. What none of them knew was that the message had indeed reached far beyond the known galactic community. Deep in what most species considered the outer rim wastelands, a small blue planet received the transmission through a monitoring station that had been quietly listening to galactic communications for decades. The human technician on duty at the Arecibo Deep Space Array was named Maria Santos. She had been working the night shift for 3 years, mostly cataloging routine trade communications and diplomatic chatter. When the Zilani distress call came through her equipment, she almost dismissed it as another political conflict between alien governments. But something in the Chancellor's voice made her listen more carefully. As the translation software converted the alien language into English, Maria felt a chill run down her spine. This was not politics. This was genocide. She immediately forwarded the message to her supervisor, Dr. James Morrison, who had been studying alien communications patterns for the past decade. Morrison listened to the recording 3 times before picking up his secure phone and calling, a number that connected directly to the United Nations Security Council emergency line. This is Dr. Morrison. At the Arecibo facility, I need to speak with someone in authority immediately. We've intercepted a distress call from an alien species that is facing complete extinction. The attack is happening right now, and they're asking for help from anyone who can hear them. The UN Security Council had been dealing with alien contact protocols for only 5 years, ever since humanity had developed faster-than-light travel and made first contact with the galactic community. Earth was still considered a minor player in galactic politics, with a small fleet and limited resources compared to the great powers of the galaxy. But as government officials listened to the Zilani transmission, something stirred in the collective human consciousness that had been dormant since the end of the last World War. It was the same feeling that had driven humans to cross oceans to fight fascism, the same instinct that had led ordinary people to risk everything to protect strangers from tyranny. Within hours, the message had reached every major government on Earth. Military leaders analyzed the tactical situation and declared it hopeless. The Korthak Empire possessed technology decades ahead of humanity's capabilities, with ships that could destroy entire cities from orbit. But in conference rooms and government buildings around the world, a different conversation was taking place. Politicians and generals who had spent their careers calculating acceptable losses and strategic advantages found themselves confronting a simple moral question that had no strategic answer. 20 billion innocent people were about to die, and they had asked for help. As dawn broke over Earth's major capitals, secure communications networks carried an unprecedented message. For the first time in human history, every major government on the planet was in complete agreement about something. The monsters of Earth were about to answer the call for mercy. The emergency session of the United Earth Council convened at 06:00 Greenwich Mean Time, less than 12 hours after the Zilani distress call reached Earth. Representatives from every major nation sat around the circular table in Geneva, their faces grim as they listened to the alien transmission for the 4th time. "The tactical analysis is clear," said General Harrison, the American representative to the Council's military committee. "The Korthak Empire has approximately 15,000 ships in their primary fleet. Our entire space navy consists of 200 vessels, most of which are exploratory craft with minimal weapons." Admiral Chen Mei-Lin of the Chinese Space Force leaned forward in her chair. Her grandfather had been a general during World War III, and her great-grandfather had fought in the Pacific theater of World War II. The Chen family had a long tradition of military service, and an even longer tradition of fighting impossible odds. "General Harrison is correct about our disadvantage in numbers," she said, her voice calm and measured. "But I believe he is missing something important about the nature of this conflict." The Russian delegate, Colonel Petrov, frowned. "What could we possibly be missing? This is a simple matter of mathematics. They have 75 ships for every one of ours. Even if our weapons were equal to theirs, which they are not, we would be destroyed within hours." Admiral Chen stood up and walked to the large display screen at the front of the room. With a few touches, she brought up tactical data from humanity's brief military encounters with other alien species over the past 5 years. "You are thinking like aliens," she said, and several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "You are thinking like civilized beings who fight wars according to rules and traditions. You are thinking like people who have something to lose." She touched the screen again, and it showed footage from the Battle of New Tokyo during World War III. Burning buildings, soldiers advancing through radiation-soaked streets, civilians fighting with improvised weapons against overwhelming odds. The Korthak Empire conquers through fear and superior firepower. They win because their enemies fight them like a conventional military force. But humans do not fight conventional wars when survival is at stake. We fight total wars. The Brazilian representative, General Silva, looked skeptical. "What exactly are you suggesting, Admiral? That we sacrifice our entire fleet in a gesture of defiance? That will not save the Zilani people. I am suggesting that we show the galaxy what Earth produces when someone asks for mercy," Chen replied. The Korthak Empire has never faced an enemy that considers death in battle to be preferable to allowing innocent people to die. They have never fought a species that views impossible odds as a personal challenge. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the civilian coordinator for the council, raised her hand. Admiral, I understand the emotional appeal of what you're saying, but we have a responsibility to our own people. If we send our fleet to fight the Korthak, we leave Earth defenseless. Chen turned to face the assembled delegates. Dr. Warren, how many ships do you think the Korthak Empire would send to conquer Earth if they decided we were a threat? According to intelligence estimates, probably 5,000 ships, Warren replied. And how many ships would we have to defend ourselves if we kept our entire fleet here? 200. So whether we send our fleet to help the Zilani or keep it here, the result is the same if the Korthak decide to attack us. We lose. Chen's voice grew harder. The only difference is whether we die as cowards who let 20 billion innocent people burn, or as humans who reminded the galaxy why our species fought its way to the top of the food chain on a death world. The room fell silent. Everyone present knew Earth's history. They knew about the wars, the genocides, the centuries of violence that had shaped human civilization. But they also knew about the other side of human nature, the side that had built hospitals in war zones, that had risked everything to save strangers, that had looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. Foreign Minister Okafor of Nigeria spoke quietly. What exactly are you proposing, Admiral? Chen touched the screen again and it displayed a tactical map of the galaxy. The Korthak Empire controls approximately 12% of known space. They maintain their power through fear and the assumption that no one will challenge them directly. Every species they have conquered has fought them the same way, ship to ship, following the accepted rules of galactic warfare. She pointed to several star systems marked in red. But humans do not follow those rules. We never have. When the Romans thought they had conquered Gaul, they discovered that Gauls did not surrender just because their armies were defeated. When the Nazis thought they had broken the Soviet Union, they learned that Russians would burn their own cities rather than let invaders have them. The display changed to show communication networks spreading across the galaxy. The Korthak maintain control through propaganda and fear. They tell conquered species that resistance is futile, that their technology is too advanced, that their numbers are too great. But they have never dealt with an enemy that broadcasts its own defeats as victories. General Harrison looked confused. I don't understand. How can defeats be victories? Because humans do not measure victory the same way other species do, Chen explained. When the defenders of the Alamo were overrun, Texas did not surrender. When the passengers of Flight 93 crashed their plane to stop terrorists, America did not give up. When the Warsaw Ghetto uprising was crushed, the world did not forget. She activated another display showing human historical records. Every human culture has stories about warriors who faced impossible odds and fought anyway. Not because they thought they could win, but because the alternative was unacceptable. We call them heroes, and we tell their stories to our children. Colonel Petrov was beginning to understand. You want to turn our military defeat into a propaganda victory? I want to do more than that, Chen said. I want to show the Korthak Empire what happens when they face an enemy that views their own deaths as acceptable casualties if it means protecting innocent people. I want to remind the galaxy that humans are not civilized because we are weak. We are civilized because we choose to be, and that choice can be revoked. Dr. Warren looked uncomfortable. Admiral, what you're describing sounds dangerously close to terrorism. What I am describing is total war conducted by a species that understands the difference between civilians and combatants, but also understands that sometimes the only way to protect civilians is to make the enemy afraid of what will happen if they continue hurting them. She turned back to the tactical display. The Korthak Empire has never faced an enemy that considers their own survival to be less important than their enemy's defeat. They have never fought a species that will spend its last ship ramming their flagship just to prove a point. They have never dealt with an opponent that views martyrdom as a tactical advantage. Foreign Minister Okafor leaned back in his chair. You are talking about changing the entire nature of galactic warfare. I am talking about reminding the galaxy why humans became the dominant species on Earth despite being weaker, slower and less specialized than most of our predators, Chen replied. We became apex predators not because we were the strongest but because we were the most relentless. Because we were the species that would chase a mammoth for 3 days across a frozen wasteland rather than let our children starve. She gestured toward the communication console that was still broadcasting updates from the Zilani system. 20 billion people are about to die because the galaxy has decided that the Korthak Empire is too strong to fight. I am proposing that we show them what happens when someone asks humans for mercy, and we decide to answer. The vote was not close. When the final tally was announced, every single delegate had voted in favor of Admiral Chen's proposal. For the first time in human history, Earth would commit its entire military to a war that had nothing to do with human interests and everything to do with human nature. As the delegates filed out of the chamber to begin preparations, Admiral Chen remained behind, staring at the tactical display. She knew they were probably about to die. She knew their fleet would likely be destroyed within hours of arriving at the Zilani system. But she also knew that the galaxy was about to learn something about humans that had been forgotten since they joined the galactic community. Humans were not civilized because they were peaceful. They were civilized because they had chosen to control the monsters that lived in their hearts. Now someone had asked for mercy, and it was time to let those monsters out. The human fleet arrived at the edge of the Zilani system 72 hours after the distress call had been received. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, Earth's flagship, and watched as her tactical display populated with enemy contacts. The Korthak fleet was even larger than intelligence had estimated. Contact count is now at 17,000 ships, reported Commander Zheng from the sensor station. They've got the entire system locked down. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the direction of Zolaris Prime. They're bombarding the surface. Chen nodded grimly. Through the main view screen, she could see the distant flashes of orbital bombardment, lighting up the night side of the Zilani homeworld. Every flash represented thousands of deaths, civilians who had done nothing except exist in the path of the Korthak war machine. Admiral, called Lieutenant Morrison from communications, I'm receiving a transmission from the lead Korthak vessel. They want to talk. Put it through. The main screen flickered and resolved into the image of a Korthak commander. The alien was tall and heavily muscled, with gray skin covered in ritual scars that marked his rank in their military hierarchy. When he spoke, his voice carried the casual arrogance of someone who had never known defeat. I am War Commander Thaklon of the Korthak Imperial Fleet. You will identify your species and state your business in this system before I decide whether to destroy you quickly or slowly. Chen stepped forward so the alien could see her clearly. I am Admiral Chen Mei Lin of the United Earth Fleet. We are here in response to a request for assistance from the Zilani Republic. Taklon's expression shifted from arrogance to confusion, then to what might have been amusement. Earth, I have never heard of this world. How many ships have you brought to challenge the might of the Korthak Empire? 200 vessels. The silence on the Korthak commander's bridge was broken by what sounded like laughter. 200 ships? Against 17,000? Taklon's amusement seemed genuine. Are your people insane or simply ignorant of basic mathematics? We are human, Chen replied. Perhaps that answers both questions. Human. Taklon repeated the word as if tasting something strange. I will offer you what I have offered no other species that has interfered with Korthak operations. You have 1 hour to retreat beyond the edge of this system. If you do so, I will not pursue you. This is more mercy than your primitive species deserves. But your foolish bravery amuses me. Chen's expression did not change. War Commander Thaklon, I have a counter-proposal. You have 10 minutes to begin withdrawing your forces from Zilani space. After that time expires, we will consider you an active threat to innocent civilians and we will respond accordingly. The laughter from the Korthak bridge was loud enough to distort the audio pickup. You would threaten me? With 200 ships against 17,000? What possible threat could your tiny fleet pose to the Korthak Empire? You're about to find out. Chen gestured to Morrison, who cut the transmission. Around the bridge of the Indomitable, her officers exchanged glances. They all knew the odds. They all understood that they were probably about to die. But none of them suggested retreat. All ships, this is Admiral Chen, she announced over the fleet communication network. You have all heard the enemy commander's offer. You know what we face. You also know why we are here. In 10 minutes, we will begin combat operations against a force that outnumbers us 85 to 1. Our mission is not to win a conventional victory. Our mission is to show the galaxy what happens when someone asks humans for help. She paused, looking around at her bridge crew. These were men and women who had volunteered for this mission, knowing they would probably not return home. They had families, dreams, futures they were willing to sacrifice for people they had never met. The Korthak Empire maintains power through fear and the assumption that resistance is futile. Today we prove that assumption wrong. Every ship we destroy, every minute we delay their operations, every act of defiance we broadcast across the galaxy will remind the universe that civilized beings do not have to submit to barbarians. The 10 minutes passed in relative silence as both fleets prepared for battle. The Korthak arranged themselves in the standard formation they had used to conquer dozens of worlds. Overwhelming firepower concentrated in disciplined battle lines. The human fleet spread out in what appeared to be a chaotic pattern that violated every principle of accepted galactic naval warfare. Enemy fleet is moving to engage, reported Commander Zhang. They're advancing in standard Korthak formation. Looks like they're planning to surround us and destroy us systematically. Let them come, Chen said quietly. All ships implement Phoenix Protocol. Remember, we are not here to survive. We are here to teach. The Phoenix Protocol was something new in galactic warfare, developed specifically for this mission. Instead of trying to preserve ships and minimize casualties, it focused on maximum damage to the enemy regardless of cost to human forces. Every human vessel was equipped with modified reactors that could be overloaded to create devastating explosions, and every captain had orders to ram enemy ships if their weapons failed. The first Korthak attack wave hit the human fleet with the force of 1,000 suns. Plasma beams and fusion missiles tore through human ships like paper, destroying 15 vessels in the first 30 seconds of combat. On any other day against any other enemy, such losses would have triggered an immediate retreat. Instead, the human fleet pressed forward. The UES Defiance, her hull breached and her engines failing, continued firing until her ammunition was exhausted, then rammed into a Korthak heavy cruiser with enough force to destroy both ships. The UES Vengeance, her bridge destroyed and her crew dead, was piloted by her AI system directly into a cluster of enemy destroyers, her overloading reactor creating a chain reaction that eliminated 12 Korthak vessels. War Commander Thaklon watched from his flagship as ship after ship of the human fleet died without retreating, without surrendering, without showing any sign of fear. This was not how civilized species fought wars. This was something else entirely. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the humans are broadcasting their battle on all frequencies. They're sending real-time footage of their ships being destroyed to every system in the galaxy. Why would they broadcast their own defeat?" "I do not think they consider this a defeat, sir. The transmission is titled, 'Remember Zelaris Prime. Humans do not forget.'" Thaklon felt something he had not experienced in 20 years of conquest. Uncertainty. The human fleet was being systematically destroyed, but they were taking a heavy toll on his forces. More importantly, they were making every death count for maximum psychological impact. When the UES Indomitable finally came under direct attack, Admiral Chen was ready. Her ship was surrounded by debris from both fleets. The space around Zelaris Prime littered with the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful military force in human history. "Admiral," called Commander Zhang, "our weapons are down to 15% effectiveness. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. We've lost contact with engineering. How many enemy ships have we destroyed?" 437 confirmed kills. The Korthak fleet is down to approximately 16,500 vessels. Chen smiled grimly. Not bad for 200 primitives from a backwater world. She opened a communication channel to the entire human fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We have accomplished our primary mission. The galaxy now knows that humans will travel across the universe to protect innocent people. Execute final protocol." Throughout the scattered remains of the human fleet, captains who were still alive began the process of overloading their reactors. Not to destroy more enemy ships, there were too few human vessels left for that to matter, but to send a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations. The UES Indomitable was the last human ship to die. As Korthak plasma beams tore through her hull, Admiral Chen stood on her bridge and watched the tactical display show the final positions of her fleet. They had lasted 6 hours against impossible odds. They had proven that the Korthak Empire could bleed. Morrison, she called to her communications officer, transmit final message to Earth Command. Tell them the monsters answered the call for mercy. Tell them the galaxy will remember. As the Indomitable's reactor went critical, her explosion lit up the darkness around Zolaris Prime like a small star. War Commander Thacklon watched from his flagship and realized that something fundamental had changed in the balance of galactic power. The human fleet was gone, but they had done something no other species had managed in 50 years of Korthak expansion. They had made the Empire look vulnerable. They had shown the galaxy that the great Korthak war machine could be hurt by an enemy, willing to sacrifice everything for a principle. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. It appears the human battle footage has been broadcast to every major world. The response is significant." "What kind of response?" "Riots on 12 Korthak-occupied worlds. 3 client species have declared independence. The Altarian Federation is mobilizing their fleet. Sir, I think the humans have started something we may not be able to stop." Thacklon stared at the wreckage floating around his ship and realized that the humans had won after all. Not through superior firepower or brilliant tactics, but the footage from the Battle of Zolaris Prime reached the Altarian Federation capital of New Thessaly, 18 hours after the last human ship died. Prime Minister Corral watched the recordings in his private office, his 4 eyes fixed on the display as human vessels rammed into Korthak warships without hesitation. "They knew they were going to die," he whispered to his aide, Deputy Minister Veltar. "Every single one of them knew it was suicide, and they did it anyway." Veltar, who had served in the Altarian military for 30 years, shook his head in disbelief. "Sir, I have studied the tactical records of every major battle in galactic history. I have never seen anything like this. They fought like machines programmed for destruction, but machines that chose their own programming." Corral replayed the final moments of the human flagship, watching Admiral Chen stand calmly on her bridge as Korthak plasma fire tore through her ship. The alien woman showed no fear, no regret, only grim determination to complete her mission even as death approached. "How many Korthak ships did they destroy?" 437 confirmed kills, sir. The humans eliminated nearly 3% of the Korthak fleet, with 200 primitive vessels. But that's not what has the intelligence services concerned. "What do you mean?" Veltar activated a different display showing communication traffic across the galaxy. "The humans broadcast everything, sir. Every death, every sacrifice, every moment of their 6-hour battle. They turned their military defeat into a propaganda victory that's spreading across every civilized world." The display showed riot footage from a dozen different worlds. On Korthak-occupied planets, civilian populations that had been cowed into submission for decades were suddenly fighting back against their occupiers. The sight of humans dying to protect strangers had somehow convinced millions of beings that resistance was possible. "The humans did not just attack the Korthak militarily," Veltar continued. "They attacked the entire foundation of Korthak power. For 50 years, the Empire has maintained control through the belief that resistance equals death. The humans proved that sometimes death equals victory." Corral stood up and walked to the window overlooking New Thessaly's government district. In the plaza below, crowds of Altarians were gathering around public viewing screens, watching the human battle footage over and over. Some were weeping. Others were cheering. All of them looked angry. "Sir," Veltar said quietly, "the Military Council is requesting an emergency session. 3 admirals have already submitted formal proposals for immediate retaliation against Korthak positions." "Retaliation for what?" "They did not attack us. They attacked the humans, sir. And apparently that is enough." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of worlds. On Proxima Centauri, the normally peaceful Council of Elders watched the human sacrifice and quietly began mobilizing their defense fleets. On Vega Prime, student demonstrations turned into full-scale riots when authorities tried to prevent the broadcast of the battle footage, but perhaps the most significant reaction came from an unexpected source. Deep in the Beta Quadrant, on a world that most species considered a backwater trading post, an old Zolani refugee named HFY watched the human battle and wept. HFY had escaped from Zolaris Prime in the final days before the Korthak bombardment. He had seen his homeworld burn, had watched his government surrender rather than face complete extinction. He had spent the last 3 years believing that his people deserved their fate because they had been too weak to defend themselves. Now he watched aliens from a distant, World died to protect Zilani civilians they had never met, and he understood that weakness was not a crime worthy of genocide. Within hours of seeing the footage, HFY began broadcasting his own message across refugee networks and hidden communication channels. His words were simple, but they carried the authority of someone who had survived the worst the Korthak could do. My name is HFY, formerly of Zalaris Prime. I want to tell you about the humans who died for my people. They came from a world called Earth, and they had never met a Zilani before. They had no reason to care about our fate except that we asked for help and they decided to answer. The old Zilani's message was picked up and rebroadcast across the galaxy, adding a personal dimension to the human sacrifice that military analysts and politicians could not provide. The humans could have ignored our distress call like everyone else. Their government could have decided that we were not worth the cost. Their people could have chosen to protect their own world instead of dying for strangers, but they did not. They came to help us because someone asked for mercy, and they decided that was enough. As HFY's message spread, something unprecedented began happening throughout Korthak-controlled space. Resistance movements that had been dormant for decades suddenly came back to life, inspired by the example of humans who had traveled across the galaxy to die for a principle. On Gordian 7, a planet that had been under Korthak occupation for 15 years, underground fighters emerged from hiding and began coordinated attacks against military installations. Their leader, a former teacher named Yargoth, broadcast his own message explaining their motivation. We have lived like slaves for 15 years because we believed the Korthak were too strong to fight. Then we saw humans from a primitive world cross the galaxy and destroy 400 Korthak ships with only 200 of their own. If humans can do that for strangers, what can we do for our own families? The Korthak Empire's response was swift and brutal. War Commander Thaklon, still in the Zilani system dealing with the aftermath of the human attack, received orders to make an example of any world that showed signs of rebellion. Within days, Korthak fleets were bombarding civilian populations on 3 different planets. But instead of terrorizing other worlds into submission, the bombardments only made the situation worse. The humans had shown the galaxy that martyrdom could be a weapon, and now every Korthak atrocity created more martyrs willing to follow the human example. The breaking point came when footage emerged from the planet Thessaly Minor, where Korthak forces had executed 3,000 civilians in retaliation for a resistance attack. The executions were broadcast live as a warning to other worlds, but the effect was the opposite of what the Korthak intended. Among the executed civilians was a 5-year-old child whose only crime was being born on a world that had dared to rebel. The footage of her death spread across the galaxy faster than any military intelligence, and with it came a message that changed everything. The message was from Earth. "This is General Morrison of United Earth Command." The transmission began. "We have received reports of Korthak war crimes against civilian populations. We want to make our position clear to all parties involved in this conflict." The general's face appeared on screens across the galaxy, and those who looked closely could see something in his eyes that made veteran soldiers uncomfortable. It was the same look Admiral Chen had worn in her final moments, the expression of someone who had moved beyond fear and found something much more dangerous. The human fleet that died at Zalaris Prime was our first response to the request for mercy. It was not our only response. Earth has been building ships and training soldiers for the past 72 hours. We are not interested in conquest or territory. We are interested in ensuring that species who request mercy receive it. Morrison's voice grew harder. Any Korthak commander who authorizes attacks against civilian populations will be considered a war criminal. Any Korthak vessel that participates in genocide will be considered a legitimate target. Any Korthak world that supports these activities will be considered complicit. The transmission paused for a moment before Morrison delivered the words that would echo through galactic history. The humans who died at Zalaris Prime were our diplomats. They spoke the only language we thought the Korthak Empire would understand: sacrifice for principle. Apparently we were wrong, so now we are sending our soldiers, and our soldiers speak a different language entirely. The transmission ended with footage of massive construction facilities on Earth and its colonies, where thousands of new warships were taking shape. The designs were unlike anything in the galactic databases. Ships built not for exploration or defense, but for one specific purpose: killing Korthak vessels as efficiently as possible. War Commander. Taklon received the human transmission while his fleet was still cleaning up debris from the Battle of Zelaris Prime. As he watched the footage of Earth's military buildup, he realized that his victory had been an illusion. The humans had not sent their fleet to Zelaris Prime to win a battle. They had sent it to start a war. And now the galaxy was choosing sides based not on strategic calculations or political alliances, but on a simple question. Do innocent people deserve protection even when protecting them is expensive? The humans had decided the answer was yes, and they had died to prove it. Now dozens of other species were reaching the same conclusion, and the Korthak Empire was about to discover what happened when the monsters of Earth were truly unleashed. The age of easy conquest was over. The age of consequences had begun. Through some 6 months after the Battle of Zelaris Prime, War Commander Taklon sat in a detention cell aboard the UES Retribution, waiting for his trial to begin. Through the small window he could see the wreckage of what had once been the Korthak Empire's primary fleet base at Nexus Station. The humans had not simply defeated the Korthak Empire. They had dismantled it piece by piece, using tactics that violated every accepted principle of civilized warfare. When Korthak commanders hid behind civilian populations, human forces broadcast warnings giving innocents exactly 1 hour to evacuate before the bombardment began. When Korthak ships used surrender flags as deception, humans stopped accepting surrenders entirely. Most terrifying of all, the humans seemed to consider their own casualties as acceptable losses in service of their larger goal. Taklon had watched human soldiers march through minefields to clear paths for alien refugees. He had seen human ships sacrifice themselves to protect evacuation transports carrying people they had never met. The cell door opened, and Admiral Chen Wei-Ming entered. She was the younger sister of Admiral Chen Mei-Lin, who had died at Zelaris Prime, and the resemblance was unmistakable. She carried the same calm certainty, the same willingness to make impossible decisions without hesitation. War Commander Taklon, she said, sitting across from him at the small table. My name is Admiral Chen. I wanted to speak with you before your trial begins. Taklon looked at her with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. You are here to gloat over your victory. I am here to make sure you understand what happened to your empire, so that other species do not make the same mistakes. She activated a small holographic display that showed the current political map of the galaxy. Where once the Korthak Empire had controlled 12% of known space, now there was a patchwork of independent worlds and human protectorates. Your empire fell because you misunderstood the nature of power, Chen said. You believed that strength came from the ability to destroy and that fear was a renewable resource. But fear requires constant maintenance, and eventually, someone always decides that the cost of submission is higher than the cost of resistance. Taklon laughed bitterly. Your humans proved that, I suppose. But what did it gain you? Half your fleet died in our wars. Your people sacrificed themselves for aliens who will never even remember their names. They will remember, Chen replied quietly. Every world we liberated has erected monuments to human sacrifice. Every species we protected teaches their children about the day Earth answered the call for mercy. My sister's name is spoken in 300 languages across 50 star systems. She touched the display and it showed images from across the galaxy. Zelani children playing in parks named after human heroes. Altarian poets composing epic songs about the Battle of Zelaris Prime. Former Korthak slaves building schools dedicated to human values of protection and sacrifice. But that is not why we fought, Chen continued. We fought because someone asked for help and we decided that was enough reason to act. The fame, the gratitude, the political advantages, those are side effects. The real victory was proving that civilized beings do not have to tolerate barbarism simply because barbarians are strong. Taklon stared at the images with growing comprehension. You changed the rules of the game. We reminded the galaxy what the rules had always been. The strong protect the weak. Those who can help do help. Those who prey on innocents face consequences. Chen's voice grew harder. Your empire forgot those rules, so we taught them again. The trial of War Commander Taklon became the most watched legal proceeding in galactic history. Representatives from 200 species gathered on the neutral world of Harmony Station to witness the first war crimes tribunal in living memory. The prosecutor was a human lawyer named Sarah Martinez, whose opening statement would be quoted in law schools for generations. Your Honors, this case is not about revenge. It is not about punishment. It is about establishing a principle that will guide galactic civilization for centuries to come. That principle is simple. Those who commit genocide will face justice regardless of how powerful they believe themselves to be. The evidence was overwhelming. Video records from dozens of worlds, testimony from thousands of survivors, documentation of systematic extermination campaigns that had killed billions of innocent beings. But perhaps the most damning evidence came from Korthak military records themselves, which showed that the Empire had carefully calculated the cost of genocide and decided it was an acceptable business expense. When the verdict was announced guilty on all charges, cheers erupted from observers across the galaxy. But the real significance was not the punishment of one war criminal. It was the establishment of a new principle in galactic law, that crimes against innocent civilians would be prosecuted regardless of the political consequences. The Korthak Empire officially surrendered 3 weeks after Thaklan's conviction. Their remaining leaders, faced with the choice between continued war against an enemy that considered death preferable to defeat, chose exile to the Outer Rim. Within a year, the last Korthak military unit had been disbanded, and their former territories were governed by a coalition of liberated species under human oversight. But the real change was subtler and more profound. Across the galaxy, aggressive species began reconsidering their expansion plans when they realized that humans would cross the universe to stop genocide. Peaceful species began requesting human protection guarantees, knowing that Earth would honor its commitments regardless of cost. The transformation was not without controversy. Many species worried about human power and influence, arguing that Earth had become too dominant in galactic affairs. But these concerns were tempered by the knowledge that humans seemed genuinely uninterested in conquest for its own sake. Admiral Chen stood before the Galactic Council 5 years after the Battle of Zalaris Prime, addressing concerns about human military expansion. "Honored delegates," she said, "I understand your worries about human power. You see our fleets, our bases, our willingness to intervene in conflicts across the galaxy, and you wonder if we have simply replaced one empire with another." She gestured to the gallery where representatives from hundreds of species sat watching the proceedings. "But I would ask you to consider this. In the 5 years since the Korthak surrender, how many worlds has Earth conquered? How many species have we subjugated? How many times have we used our military power for territorial gain?" The answer was 0, and everyone in the chamber knew it. Human forces had intervened in dozens of conflicts, but always in defense of innocent populations, and always with the goal of restoration rather than occupation. "We do not seek to rule the galaxy," Chen continued. "We seek to ensure that what happened to the Zalani people never happens again. We are not conquerors. We are guardians, and we will continue to serve in that role for as long as the galaxy needs us." The speech was well received, but the real test of human intentions came 6 months later, when the planet Meridian requested independence from its human protectorate status. The world's government had been established with human assistance after liberation from Korthak occupation, but now they wanted full autonomy. The galaxy watched closely to see how Earth would respond to a direct challenge to its authority. Would the humans reveal their true nature as another imperial power? Would they use military force to maintain control? Instead, Admiral Chen personally attended Meridian's independence ceremony and handed over full governmental authority to the planet's elected leaders. In her farewell speech, she delivered words that became the unofficial motto of human foreign policy. "We came to Meridian because you needed help. We leave because you no longer need us. That is what Guardians do." The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy, and the message was clear. Humans were not interested in building an empire. They were interested in building a galaxy where empires were no longer necessary. 10 years after Admiral Chen Mei Lin died at Zalaris Prime, her sacrifice had fundamentally altered the balance of galactic civilization. Aggressive expansion was no longer a viable strategy for any species, because everyone knew that humans would intervene to protect innocent populations. Peaceful species could focus on growth and development rather than military defense, because they knew Guardians were watching. The monsters of Earth had answered the call for mercy, and in doing so, they had created a galaxy where mercy was no longer rare. But perhaps the most fitting memorial to the human sacrifice was found on Zalaris Prime itself. where the Zilani people had built a simple monument in the exact spot where Admiral Chen's ship had died. The inscription was written in every known language, but the message was universal. Here died strangers who became heroes. Here began the age when those who ask for mercy receive it. Here the monsters of Earth proved that the greatest strength is using power to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Every year, on the anniversary of the battle, beings from across the galaxy gathered at the monument